After 21 hours of intense negotiations in Islamabad, the United States and Iran walked away without a deal. What makes this more striking is what came after. Iran's foreign minister said the agreement was inches away, and yet it collapsed completely. On the other side, the US delegation called it a final and best offer, but said Iran refused to commit on key issues. So how does something that close fall apart so quickly? Because beneath the surface, the disagreements were never small. At the heart of the breakdown were two issues that neither side could move on. First, Iran's nuclear program. The US wanted a clear, long-term commitment that Iran would not pursue nuclear weapons, including strict limits on uranium enrichment. Iran refused. Not necessarily because it wants a bomb, but because giving up that leverage without guarantees is something it no longer trusts. And that brings us to the second issue, sanctions and economic relief. Iran wanted sanctions lifted, frozen assets released, and compensation for past strikes. The US wanted compliance first. So both sides were effectively saying the same thing: you move first, and neither side did. To understand why this deadlock is so deep, you have to go back. The last major deal, the 2015 nuclear agreement, collapsed when the US withdrew years later. Since then, trust hasn't just weakened, it's disappeared. So today's talks weren't happening in a neutral environment. They were happening in the middle of an active conflict with Israel involved, with global pressure mounting, and with both sides under domestic political pressure. Even Pakistan's role as mediator was limited. It could bring both sides to the table, but it couldn't force either side to compromise. Which raises a bigger question. Was this really a negotiation? Or was it both sides testing each other's red lines before deciding what comes next? Because now that the talks have failed, the situation is moving fast. The US has already announced a naval blockade around the Strait of Hormuz, one of the world's most critical oil routes. There are also discussions around potential new strikes if tensions escalate further. Iran, in response, has warned that any such move will be treated as an act of war. So what are the possible paths from here? 1. Escalation. More strikes, more regional conflict, and a wider war. 2. A prolonged stalemate. No deal, no peace, but no full-scale war either. And 3. Back-channel diplomacy. Quiet talks away from the spotlight. Even now, some officials say diplomacy is not completely off the table. Because what these talks revealed is something deeper. This wasn't just a negotiation that failed. It was a reflection of how far apart both sides still are. On paper, the deal may have been inches away. But in reality, the gap was always much bigger. And until that gap is bridged, every ceasefire will remain fragile and every negotiation uncertain.